Welcome back to another episode. I want to talk about something today that I haven't talked about. I don't even think I've hit on in any of the financial therapy podcasts that I've done. And it's the topic of gray divorce. I wrote a column on this some time ago. And I really want to get into it a little bit more than what I did in the column that I wrote, which is something that I do quite often with the podcast, is to take something that I've written about that probably has a little bit more of a, when I write, a financial focus, and really flesh out the emotional component of what's going on. So, um, so let's talk a little bit about gray divorce. So when we're talking about gray divorce, we're talking about folks in there, folks that have gray hair that get divorced. um, so I guess that's obvious enough. These are typically people that have been married for quite a while. So I not too long ago, I was listening to an attorney, and I thought about and we were talking about asset protection. I actually had him doing a presentation to my clients on asset protection. And as some of you might know, not too long ago, South Dakota was really in the headlines about our asset protection trusts. And I could go off on that for the whole time, but that it's not on topic. There's a lot of emotion around it, but not on topic to what we're talking about. But the whole point of asset protection is helping somebody defend themselves against a frivolous lawsuit or when their insurance fails, and help protect the wealth that they've accumulated, which is especially sad when your insurance fails. So I spend a reasonable amount of time on asset protection. It's one of these specialties that our financial planning firm does. And we spend a lot of time on helping people have the right insurance so they're not devastated, and the right health insurance so they're not devastated financially by big claims. And a number of things to help protect their wealth. But it occurred to me as I listened to this attorney talking, he said, you know what the number one destroyer of wealth is in the U.S. is a divorce. And as I thought about that, I thought, wow, have I really missed helping clients protect against that? When you think of how common divorce is, around 50% of marriages in divorce, and that it's not uncommon that your net worth is reduced by 50%, that's way more common, way more of a threat to financial security than a frivolous lawsuit. So I thought maybe we could spend some time on that. Because it is just devastating, and especially with older clients and, or speaking of clients, sorry, older folks, and folks that have been married longer than 10 years. And just how devastating this is, I'm debating with myself whether to get into the weeds with the numbers, because this is more about the emotions. But this is called financial therapy, and there's two words in it, right? Financial and therapy, so the numbers belong. So let me just hit the numbers very quickly. Let's say that we had a couple that was worth $2 million. And that $2 million will produce a $60,000 a year income, basically for the rest of one's life. So if they split and they're divorced, it's reasonable that a judge would split that 50-50 and they each would walk away with $1 million, which would give them $30,000 a year of income. The problem is when you split and you become singles, your expenses don't drop in half. One of the problems is that you now have two places that you're going to have to live, two apartments, two homes, two sets of utility bills, two sets of cable bills, twice the maintenance. So even though your income is split, your expenses are going to go up over 50%. And also a lot of people don't realize that when you become single, that your income taxes are going to go up. So without hugely getting into the math, it would be, if your expenses would increase by only 25%, and I figure that they'll increase by 25 to 50%, if they just would increase by 50%, each spouse is probably going to have to reduce their lifestyle by 22 to 35%. Now, just think about that right now on whatever you're making. Let's just say you have a partner and you jointly make $100,000 a year. Imagine what your lifestyle would be like if you cut that by 22 to 35%. That means 22,000 to 35,000. So instead of 100,000, you now are living on 65 to $78,000. All right. So that is the bottom line dollar cost of a gray divorce. And the reason that it's so devastating is if you're in your 20s or 30s and you get divorced, the chances are you're still in that accumulation stage of hitting your stride, economically, financially at your job. You're just entering the earning years. You may have a younger family, but typically you're more in a wealth accumulation stage. And you've got time. You've got time to accumulate. That is not so when you're 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, whatever that age would be. So I hope I've painted enough picture to say that a gray divorce can be really financially devastating. So what can we do to help prevent a gray divorce? Well, I remember early on in my work in financial therapy that Dr. Ted Klontz would often say, when a couple's fighting about money, it's their money scripts that are fighting, not them. So there can be a lot of benefit in doing financial therapy, in taking a look at a little deeper look at what's going on. Now, the reason people get divorced is not always about money, right? I don't know what percent of people that get divorced over financial issues. I think it's one of the top reasons that people do get divorced. I'm not so sure how common it would be for gray divorce. I would almost think that it could be less about financial issues, but I'm not sure about that. But nevertheless, it's really helpful for a couple to take a look at what's going on. And so often it can be about the money, about the spending habits, about where we're going to invest our money and our time when there's competing needs. One partner may have a need to be around the grandkids. The other partner wants to be as far away as possible. And for whatever reason, there's not enough money for everybody to get exactly what they want. Estate planning is a real area where couples can really get stuck and really hung up on how much to give and how to give it and whether to use trusts or not, whether not to give to one child and give to another. I mean, it can just go on and on. The conflicts that can arise around money. So the way that I look at it is a huge positive investment to do some type of couples therapy when there's problems. And the best time, of course, to engage in therapy, engage a couples therapist, is when the problems are starting to creep up. Now, that's usually never the case when a couple seeks out help. Usually, it's got to be a screaming crisis before we engage any type of therapeutic help. And that can be kind of sad because sometimes it's kind of like the toothpaste can be out of the tube, right? And it's really hard to get it back in. So if I could give any of you that maybe in this scenario, maybe you are working with couples that may be having issues, maybe it's a parent, is any encouragement that you can give them to seek out some help, seek out a couples therapist, seek out a financial therapist that deals with couples. Maybe they'll start the process a few months earlier or a few years earlier when things can still be negotiated and resolved. So, and the money that's spent, certainly it's not cheap to engage a financial therapist. If I had to guess what a quote going rate is for a financial therapist, it's probably between $200 and $500 an hour. No, that certainly is not cheap, but it may be way cheaper than a divorce. Way cheaper. So try to resolve that with the issues and the fears and the money scripts that come up over we can't afford this. It may be that you can't afford not to do it. So when as a couple, when you're engaging a therapist, when you're engaging a financial therapist, it's good to check out whether the therapist has a specialty or training in working with couples. And you might think, well, every therapist would work with couples, right? No, that is not true at all. There's many therapists that will not work with couples. I don't know, but I'm going to guess there's more that won't than more that will. And this is true of financial therapists, although I think it's more common for a financial therapist to work with a couple, just as it is a financial planner to work with a couple. But working with a couple is a real different scenario. In the course that I have taught at Golden Gate University, we have a chapter on working with couples. And typically by the end of that chapter, most of the budding financial planners that are going through the course are like, I think I'm just going to work with individuals. I never considered the pitfalls of working with a couple. Because in working with a couple, you've got a lot of interests in the room. You have the couple, so you, instead of working with one person, you're working with two. And then you've got the coupleship, which is kind of a third party that's in the room, because you might be able to relate to, if you're in a relationship, that oftentimes there's parts of you that show up differently alone or by yourself with somebody else than when you are with your partner. There's a different dynamic. It's the same like with kids, right? Any of you that have kids, how many times have you just cringed when your child goes over to somebody else's house, or you drop them off at daycare or wherever it is, and you're so concerned because at home the child is a little terror, and you go to pick them up and they're like, wow, your child is so well behaved, and you're like, are you talking about my child, or did you get him confused? He's that one, or she's that one over there. So there's a whole dynamic at play between the couples. So it's extra work for a financial therapist. And sometimes a couples therapist will actually charge more than working individually. So that's something you want to check out with anybody that you're looking at doing any type of couples work with. And there's actual couples training that therapists can go through to help them understand more of the dynamics, understand how to successfully work with a couple, and probably most importantly, to look at their own, we call it countertransference, but their own issues that get triggered or can get triggered in working with the couple. Because it's pretty important that a financial therapist working with a couple is neutral, is balanced, doesn't take sides. And that just doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's a training that I have been doing called IFIO, Intimacy from the Inside Out. And it's specific training for IFS, Internal Family Systems practitioners and therapists around how to work with a couple with the modality of internal family systems. Now, that said, I have absolutely zero intention of ever working with couples that are warring with each other. The last thing in the world that I would like to be is a couples therapist. So, and I have reasons and stories behind that. But let's just say when a couple starts fighting in my office, while my body is present in front of them, I've got probably a 5-year, 6-year-old part that's over hiding underneath my desk. And I use that terminology long before I even knew there was such a thing as internal family systems therapy. So, however, as a financial planner, I've worked with couples forever. I have more couples than individuals. So I figured it could not hurt me as both a financial planner and a financial therapist to learn a little bit more about the dynamics between couples. So if you're looking for a couples therapist and you are intrigued or drawn to the IFS model, internal family systems model. But you can find out more about that at let's see, the IFS institute.org. I believe you can Google it and find that. If you're drawn to that, then you'd want to look for a therapist that has had IFIO training, and it's usually like 72 hours, and it is very, very, very good. So check that out to be sure that the therapist has some tools in helping you out. And I would also say don't expect miracles right away. This is a process. It has taken the couple years, probably decades, to get where they're at. And it's not going to be sorted out in 1 or 2 sessions. If it is, wow, that's great, right? But it probably is not going to be sorted out. And the preparation, the emotional preparation for going into an engagement like this is to start to look at yourself, to turn your focus inward, and to ask yourself, what's going on inside of me? When my spouse says this, when my spouse does that, and I react, what's happening? What's happening inside of me? What emotions am I feeling? What thoughts am I having about myself or my relationship, not the other person? And where we usually go is immediately, well, if they would, da 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 da, if they would, da 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 da, if they wouldn't, da 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 da. And there's going to be a lot more success in the therapy with starting to look at what is happening inside of you. And look at what is happening inside of you with whatever behavior that you are contributing to this dance. Most couples have a dance. It's a pattern that goes back and forth, and it doesn't really matter what the content is. It matters about the process. And as we begin to drill down, no matter what the behavior is that we're having with our spouse, whether it might be yelling, it might be shutting down, it might be trying to manipulate. I mean, there's all sorts of things. It's really important to try and determine, what do I hope? What are my hopes for what I just said, or the behavior that I'm eliciting? What do I hope that this is going to do for me? What are my fears if I don't have this certain type of behavior? What are my fears if I don't continually remind? Or what are my hopes for not spending money and saving more? And what are my fears if we don't? And if each partner can get to this place of drilling down to get to their hopes and fears around the relationship, oftentimes you're going to find that both partners are wanting the same thing. They're wanting the same outcome. It might be connectedness. It might be health in retirement. It might be doing the things that they enjoy together. But it usually takes a lot of introspection and focusing on what is going on inside of you to get to that part because we can so quickly get triggered and go to, well, if they would just do this, it would be okay. So that's a place to that an IFIO financial therapist or therapist can help a client in starting to have that type of language and to begin to talk about more about what's going on inside of them and why. And then eventually, as you get into doing a little bit more IFS therapy, the history behind all of your behaviors, because it's in the opening and closing of this podcast that it's not about the money. It's and every behavior, no matter how illogical it seems to ourselves or other people, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs and emotions that are around that. So this is true of your spouse. An IFS therapist would say, when Dr. Klons would talk about it's your money scripts battling, that's true. It is the beliefs that parts of you have around money and how it works, or many other things that may come out in the money. It's those parts of you battling with your spouse's parts, and usually these parts of ourselves that are wounded, that have these beliefs that don't serve us well anymore, may have served us well once as a younger person. They're battling, they're usually very young, undeveloped parts of ourselves. So it's understanding that that's what's engaging when we are, quote, fighting or disagreeing with our spouse, and trying to be with someone that can really help us become more present, more of an objective observer of our actions, of our beliefs, of what's going on, and then being able to see the same thing in your partner that's going on, can be really, really helpful in starting to understand that, to understand your partner is reacting for a very specific reason. And once that can be brought out, it can be enlightening both to your partner and to you, and vice versa. So I hope this has been helpful. I do have somebody on my staff that's a certified divorce financial analyst, and I thought it might be interesting to do a podcast and talk with her about what she sees around this. So perhaps we'll do that. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this was somewhat insightful, and I look forward to seeing you in another episode. Take care.